guys, welcome to the Real Hadeel podcast, and today I have Lisa. She's the CEO of Upside Thinking. She's also an author, a speaker, and a writer. And Lisa was also in the law enforcement before actually starting her company. So I want you guys to get give a warm welcome to Lisa. She's going to talk a little bit about how to be a leader that's worth following. So Lisa, please tell us a little bit more how you got started.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be here. And, topic about how to be a leader worth following. I think so many people are leaders. And so it's not so much that it's the how-to that individuals haven't experienced leadership. It's just how do you get to have more people following you so you get to do the great work that you're called to do in the world. And I think that that's so important so that more people are doing the work that they're called to do so that the world just ultimately is a better place to live in. So I'm excited. I'm excited that we're talking about this topic today.
Thank you. And I'm excited to have you because actually I have a lot of questions that I actually personally want to ask you. And I know that a lot of my viewers have been mentioning before from previous podcasts. They really want to know some of these answers to these questions because the number one reason or the number one way to really just not only just make a difference, but how should I put it? Move the world, a movement like Martin Luther King Jr. and all these other amazing leaders is really just knowing how to lead, but in a way that's influential. So please explain to me a little bit more. How do you, I know a lot of women and maybe even, do you only coach women or is it men too as well?
No, I have men that I coach also. However, my business really went through a transition. When I first started 13 years ago, it was primarily men because as you shared, my background was in law enforcement. And so, the ability to be a challenger and the ability to really get down to business strategy was something that I'm good at. And so I attracted a lot of men in my business. And I started to change the languaging, and marketing is so important and that if you make one small tweak, you can get an entirely different audience. And that's really what happened is that I would go into organizations and began having conversations with women and found that the differences in what they needed were not so much significant, they were slight, and they were something that I didn't see, I guess, because of being in such a male-dominated field and working with so many men, that many of the women were coming to me not feeling like they truly were the leader in the room, not feeling like they had a voice, not feeling like they were seen or heard when there were a lot of other men around, and how to do that without force, like how to do that with being feminine and courageous and at the same time not having to put on some other kind of armor or be something that they're not. So how do you be a leader worth following without changing who you are when you're someone who's dealing with feminine energy? Is that possible? And I found it to be such an interesting conversation. And so the pendulum for me really swung to where now I work with so many women leaders and I want to say mostly women leaders, and then I now get that handful of men. So it's really fascinating how that pendulum has swung. And like I said, so much about that in sort of just the tweaking with your marketing language and your branding because I have such a heart for women in leadership.
I completely agree with you because even one of my biggest struggles, even just being a leader in my own company, it's like, where's the line, because men, they can, it's okay for men in the stereotypical thing and the culturally, it's okay for men to be a little bit more dominant. It's okay for men to be aggressive. But as soon as a woman walks in and kind of also acts in that same way, it's not seen as very nice. It's not seen as normal, right? For how a woman should be. And so that fine line really just, I completely feel for all the other women that have probably come to you because it's something I ask myself every day. Am I being authentic? Am I being myself? Am I just putting up a front because I'm the leader, right? It's really just, and sometimes you have to, I don't know about you and how you teach it, but I'm really actually very curious. When I go into situations and I start asking myself these questions, I quickly stop and I realize, okay, hold on. just because I'm the leader doesn't mean it's about me. So, and that's
brilliant.
the biggest thing, you know, and I'm sure you can completely agree with this. It's like, okay, if I'm going to go, what's right for the situation versus what's right for me, right? And you have to really sit down and and it's always taking that ego away. And I'm definitely want to admit I have a very big ego, and I have to really, really like fight myself every day to tell myself, Hadeel, that's not how you should be acting. And you always have to take yourself back out of it and walk into that situation and be like, okay, how can I say this in a way where it's going to get what I need, and also what I need for the business, but also make them feel like it's what they need too. So give me some, I mean, I know you probably do this every day with your, you know, coaching and stuff. What are things that you should share with your, you know, members in your mastermind group or your own students?
I love that you use the word should, because that's a word that can be incredibly dangerous, right? And I use it, I get it. It's like there's these shoulds, like the way to behave is like, this is what it's okay and acceptable if you're, you know, a strong man, and this is what it should be if you really are, you know, a woman, and that's in a leadership position. And right now there definitely are differences that still exist. And, you know, and speaking from the perception of the United States of America versus even other cultures, we could have a whole other conversation about that, as I see that in my work tremendously when I'm working with other cultures, or even other you know, other countries, you know, that very, very different. So speaking about from being here, what I find to be amazing is that there still are very rooted expectations of what it looks like to behave in a way that's proper, or it should look like this. And for me, when you ask, you know, what are the things that I say, or what are the things that are elements that come up in conversation, and the number one so let me take a step back. So I have 7 pillars of leadership, and I feel these 7 pillars of leadership are critical to being able to be someone who's a leader worth following. And pillar number 2 is understanding your personality. And so I think that part is foundational, because when you understand your personality, you understand what your strengths are, what your areas of development, what it is that you do really well. You mentioned the word ego. And if your aspiration is leadership, if you aspire to be a leader, meaning someone who has followers, and you're someone who wants to you know, be the head honcho, if you will, then there is ego involved. There absolutely is ego involved. It's always about whether something is unhealthy. And despite the fact that I know as much as I know about leadership and the things that I've done well, I can still engage in narcissistic behavior. I can still engage in behavior where it's like, this is about me. And so what you spoke about is, in talking about how do I get the end result, and how do I also bring other people around, is I think one of the elements of ensuring that, number one, you surround yourself with people who truly see you for all of the things that you do incredibly well, and the things that you don't. So this element, this second pillar of in my 7 pillars, is understanding your personality, and understanding that it has pieces of it that will help your plan and help you succeed. And it also has pieces of it that will hinder your plan and keep you from success, because it will keep you from people wanting to follow you and be around you. And years ago, I remember taking an assessment, and in the assessment, it wasn't pretty. You know, Hadeel, it wasn't pretty at all when I got back the results, because it was this 360 assessment, and you know, my boss's boss relayed, you know, had scored me, and I expected perfection. You know, I was doing all these great things, so I expected perfection. I got the results back, and out of a scale of 1 to 5, you know, there were these 2s and 3s, and I was like, what the heck? And yet, looking at it from the standpoint of works well with others, likes to win, yes, at all costs. Back then, 20 years ago, those were the things that could have derailed my career. They could have derailed my life. And so having the ability to examine what are the things that are working for you and not working for you. Even just this past year, I've probably been to a half a dozen trainings. I believe so much in professional development and personal development, examining my own leadership style. And as one of the trainings, the instructor said, sometimes when you speak, you have an arrogance about you. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I happen to be one of the people that in my opinion, like I care so deeply. I care so deeply about people and give so much of my time and talent and money away to things that I believe in. And yet she was seeing this little glimpse of the thing that can keep people away from following me, right? And so it doesn't have to be big. I look at it as we all have this little kid, right? So there's a little kid, and the little kid has no preconceived notions of who people should be. And then what happens is all of a sudden we get told something's wrong. And so we create some sort of like mask or some sort of like armor. And then we put another piece and another piece and another piece and another piece. And soon we don't even recognize who we are. And so I just look at that as she noticed this little piece of something that was designed to serve as protection for me. And she saw it and went, when you speak like that, this is what happens. And I went, okay, so it's time for me to let that go, because I don't want that to be the thing to get in the way of me fully utilizing my gifts and abilities and talents and experiences to step into my calling. So I hope that helped.
No, that makes perfect sense. I was actually curious, was it the badge you're talking about? Whenever you would speak, you would carry it with you? Remember when you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So she was was she telling you to let that one go, or are you talking about?
No. Like literally, like the pieces within that allow me to bring out a sense of, like I've figured this out. And I think that what that is it's language designed to keep me safe, right? Because ultimately, there are things that scare me in life. Right. And so the protection when most people are in fear mode is to be defensive and to come out a little bit harder, right? You can't get me. I'm tough. I'm invincible. And you see it in conversations, and I can be in that place. So it wasn't a physical badge. It was actually the armor that's like emotionally created. No.
I remember when you first spoke and I saw you speak, you held your badge when you were first, when you were a police officer at the time. So I was like, oh, okay, she's talking about that or that, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And it's the emotional armor.
It is the emotional armor. And honestly, I salute you, because that obviously tells me you're a very strong woman, because, you're put in a very vulnerable state when someone calls out your weakness, or someone calls out something very, very like only to you that you know of, or maybe you're not even aware of, but you slightly know, but then it's like spoken in existence and like in front of everyone, or or whoever, or someone, it's a lot it's a lot to take in, but at the same time, that tells me that, okay, you're definitely a type of leader who is ready for the feedback, just wants it, because anybody who's just hungry to grow and change and just learn to be a better version of themselves, never fear what the unbroken may be within them that's presented, right? It's more so like because someone once told me, you should never fear the truth, because the truth is what leads you to happiness either way. Whether the truth may be painful or not, it doesn't necessarily really matter, because the whole point of the end goal is to reach this type of happiness, whether it be a better version of yourself or reaching a certain goal, whatever it may be. So it's really just the truth that's being brought to you, and sometimes that can be very eye-opening in some way. That kind of like feeling like, oh no, she just said it, but it's the truth. That's amazing that you went through that and you realized what you were, at least you're becoming more aware of those things, which is even better, I think, and you're kind of ahead of the game in that way too.
Absolutely.
the personality, once you know your personality, you're aware of what you can do to move forward, and also at the same time how to communicate with people, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes.
And that's like a big thing to know, because at least for me, sometimes, like, I don't know, when I go into conversations, I can be a little too blunt, or I could be a little quick when I speak, or sometimes I'll do certain things that I'm aware of that can be on someone else's, on someone who was on the other side listening to me speak, could get a little bit hurt or could feel a certain way when I speak, and that I'm aware of. So whenever I see that certain like look, I'm like, oh wait, this is what I mean. I'm sorry if it came out like this, and it changes the whole conversation, versus not bringing that up and then letting it just keep going, because you don't know, they won't speak up sometimes. People won't just tell you how they feel.
So that, I think, is a huge amount of self-awareness, and it's also emotional intelligence. And the greatest part about what you just shared is that in the emotional intelligence continuum that Daniel Goleman had created, self-awareness might be the first piece. However, you can be incredibly self-aware, but what you just spoke about was self-regulation. And so once you're self-aware, if you're not able to then regulate, or then go, oh my gosh, I see how this can change our conversation or get in the way, and this is what I meant, this is not what I intended to say, then you're able to fully open up the conversation and all of its possibilities. And what I think is so beautiful about that is that if you look at the research in what makes a leader effective, we're talking about, continuing that conversation of a leader worth following, emotional intelligence is 90% more important than intellectual intelligence, than your IQ, because it has that ability to affect the relationships and the dynamics in working with others. And so it's not possible to have followers. It's not possible to be the major influencer if you aren't able to both have the self-awareness and the self-regulation. And then, of course, there's so many other components to emotional intelligence, but that's such a big piece. And it ties right into the personality part as well. So I love that you're saying that. You mentioned about me receiving that feedback, and I think that one of the elements for it is that was a safe space for me to receive that. And I am a very different person than I was years ago, when I would really be defensive receiving something like, you don't understand, that's not how I am, and really wanting to fight, as you mentioned, the truth, and fight what is, but let me explain it to you. Let me tell you what I really meant, rather than listening and saying, oh my gosh, if this can get in the way of the relationship, then that's a problem. That's a problem for me. It's a problem for the world if I need this person to do whatever it is I'm called to do. And years ago, when I was in the government, and one of the big turning points for me was getting feedback that wasn't in a safe place, and that I was a very different person. And it was taking a self-assessment. And I think that I had shared this before with, on stage when you and I first met, that I had really been struggling in the government, and I got feedback, and my assessment results on an interpersonal skills assessment showed that I was a 0.
Wow.
And a 0 is pretty low, and getting that feedback in that place was not safe. And I really had a crossroads at that moment, because it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, even though at the time it was so painful. Because at that crossroads, I was able to say, Lisa, if you don't do something about this, if you don't change this, you could be smart and tough, you could be strong and right, and you could be alone and dead. Because it was then that I realized I had created all of these barriers and walls that really got in the way of me having a meaningful and happy life. I no longer recognized who I was in relationship to other people. And that led me on the journey to connection, and which I've got a second edition of my book coming out, Connection, the New Currency. And if I would not have had that experience, I wouldn't be able to talk about connection or write about it or share it or give the gifts that I've learned that were incredibly painful.
Right.
So, you're so spot on about both the difficulty in receiving and at the same time the gift in the receiving. There's a saying I use in my business: comfort doesn't change the world, vulnerability changes everything. Comfort doesn't change the world. So it doesn't mean you have to be in pain, but it just means that that openness is so important.
That's completely 110% so true, because when you look at it like that, you start realizing that, hey, it's okay to allow my weaknesses to be surface level. It's okay for me to, say, hey, yeah, I'm actually really not good at this, or I'm actually really need to improve on this.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, people, one thing I've learned, people respect you a lot more when you're honest, and most importantly, when you're honest with yourself and you say that out loud. Before, I would never have told anyone, especially online, that I have a big ego. I would keep that to myself because I knew that was a big problem.
Yeah.
And I didn't want people to think I was judgmental. I didn't want people to think I was a certain way. And then I said, you know what? I was like, that's it. That I have to put myself in a place where I need to change. And if I say it out loud and I let people know, they're aware that I am aware of who I am, and that I'm really trying my best not to be that person. And that puts people in a place where they're more forgiving and understanding, and it puts you in a better place than you were before if you didn't say anything and they just took what you just said and they're like, what? It puts you in a better place. And you said something very important, and it really resonates to me a lot, because it's just so hard to do anything in this world if you're not vulnerable. It's just so hard because people can't relate to you. Because in the end of the day, if you really study people to the T and to the bare, literally just study them to their own core, everybody's just trying to look good. And that's just the truth. Everyone's really just trying to look good, and everyone's afraid of you because they're trying to look good in front of you. And when you look at it like that, in that perspective, and not in a negative way, just more so of a understanding where everyone's coming from in life, you start understanding, okay, if they're so afraid of looking good in front of me right now, then I should not be this certain person. I should allow them to feel comfortable around me. And it makes people more comfortable to not only open up, but also just be themselves. And it just changes everything. The energy around you just changes, And you said something important. I actually want to ask you this question. You said, you were talking about how your next book's about communication and how being vulnerable and understanding your weaknesses. How does one, and I'm curious because I recently did this, it's like a homework thing I did, where I was like, let me just try this. Because I was reading in a book, someone said, the reason why your relationships in business and just with friendships isn't working is because your personal relationships aren't working. And that's probably because it's like, your personal, whoever you're interacting with consistently and on a daily level, like your parents or your siblings or your aunts or uncles, whatever it may be, if those relationships are broken, that subconsciously translates into other relationships as well. That brokenness, that feeling. Sometimes at one point I was feeling like I couldn't connect with people. And I was like, why can't I connect with people? I used to be able to be so good at making people feel comfortable around me. I used to be so good at allowing people to talk to me. These days I'm like, before I was like, no, I feel like there's a, have you ever felt that, where there's just like a wall? It almost felt like a business transaction versus a nice, just a good relationship or a good conversation to have with someone. If a student came to you, I guess my question is, how do you help them fix the core of their problems when it comes to communication? Or what perspective do you give them to kind of move forward to make sure that the next relationships they're building, it's just more meaningful, more purposeful?
You ask a great question that spills over into all aspects of life. And you're speaking about relationship building and communication, and the crux of all of it is really trust.
Mm.
I look at it as people are all wanting to be loved and valued and appreciated for who they are.
Right.
And you mentioned that people want to look good. And ultimately, it's because they want to be loved and valued and appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question that often, I remember hearing this after hearing Oprah live and having her say that the number one question she received was, didn't matter who it was, could have been the person that she had on that was in prison for 50 years or the person that was, the wealthiest banker. The question was always at the end of the show, was I good? Was I okay? Was that what you wanted? So this desire of, as you say, looking good, which ultimately I see as coming from a place of, I want to be valued, I want to be appreciated, and I want to be loved for who I am. Yeah. And so in order for that to happen, to be truly valued, appreciated, and loved for who we are, it has to start here. Mm. And so the deep connection, when I was on the journey of connection after receiving that 0, that journey took me to learn more about connection and what it is, and learn more about my own connection with myself, and ultimately spilled over, as you share, into personal relationships. And so some of the issues I was having on the job with the guys that I was working with were because I was trying so hard to prove that I was right, that I wasn't really listening to what other people were saying. Mm-hmm. And I was spending so much time on trying to figure out what would be the right thing to do, and to prove to you that was, the only and the best option. And, the idea that knowledge is power became, such a mantra, where it was like, if I keep all my knowledge to me, then I can be the most powerful, almost lording over others. And so much like you, the idea of disclosing online about ego or narcissism or any of those things does not feel comfortable. It does not feel good. Mm-hmm. And yet at the same time, to get to the root of what deepens connection, what deepens relationship, is being able to pull back all of those things and be fully 100% comfortable with who I am, with for each person to do that for themselves. And I will share that, I grew up in a family where, my last conversation with my biological father was when I was 17, and he passed away 6 years ago. And over the last 2 years since I found this out, I've been on the journey of repairing that relationship, even though my father I will never have a conversation with him again in this life, right? And it's because I know that it can get in the way of our connection, even without anybody understanding it or knowing that. And so all the parts of who we are affect all of the dynamics of the relationships that we have with others. And so, when you talk about, what's the advice, if you will, for me, it's always going back to understanding yourself and making sure there are no barriers that can possibly get in the way. And I've had people say, oh my gosh, I could never forgive that person. I could never be right with that person. I could never, you don't know what they've done. And I think that's the reason why I sit on the board of a global nonprofit, Project Forgive. Mm-hmm. And Project Forgive is about forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the end goal is to alleviate suffering in the world. Because when you don't forgive yourself or others for something, you can never be fully right in deep connection with others. Yeah. And that third pillar that I speak about is building powerful partnerships. But you can't be in partnership until you learn how to connect. And you can't connect until you understand your personality and get right with you, so that you can be right with others. So, and so many practical steps to that is like, well, how do you do, like, to just say, like, what's the most practical step to that, so that we're not all in theory, is that I spend time in quiet with myself. I spend time in self-examination and self-reflection every morning. And then I go to places like this training that I spoke about, where there are people in community who are able to see what it is that I can't see.
Mm-hmm.
I have a board of advisors, I have coaches, I have mentors, I have mastermind groups that I go to. Even though I have clients of my own, I still have a whole series of people. And I continue to engage in a variety of different methodologies so that all of the layers that have been created over the past close to 50 years can be fully peeled away, so I can be the most authentic and the most connected version of myself to truly move forward as a powerful, courageous, feminine leader, so that I can make the difference I'm called to make in the world. And so whenever something's not right and people go, I'm not so sure about that, it ultimately boils down to trust. Because there's something there that you can't put your hands on with the person because they haven't worked on their own stuff.
Right. That was powerful. I can't agree. I just there's everything you said was so right. It was so right, because ultimately, if there's any problem in anywhere, in any aspect of your life, it's because of you in some way, shape, or form. And that self-reflection is just so huge. And also just not even just that, like you even said, having other people who know you so well and actually who actually spend time with you and care about you, even if you pay them, they still care, right? They have
yes.
And that's okay. And that's so important, because they're your eyes when you're blind, essentially. And that's just it, and it's so hard to, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And having someone outside see that is huge. It's huge,
Yeah.
That's extremely powerful. I love that. So wait, so you said that, okay, so the second one was your personality. The third one was self-reflection. Am I that?
No, build powerful partnerships.
Build powerful partnerships. That's right. Then what's the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh? And then, yeah.
So the first one is to...
You never said the first one, yeah.
You do the first one. So the first one is to create a written plan. Written being the key word, not typed, written. A written plan starting with the end in mind. That's important. And then there's understanding your personality. They all begin with P. Building powerful partnerships. The fourth one is living your priority. Now, I did not say priorities. I said priority. Everyone has one priority. In the 1990s, the English language changed, where the word priority that used to exist now became priorities. Somehow people were supposed to have more than one priority. If you look at the definition, it's one thing. You can only move towards one thing at a time. You cannot move towards 10 things at a time. When I'm working on the videos for my annual Design Your Destiny live conference, I cannot simultaneously work on my influential leadership blueprint. I can have someone else on my team do it, but I have one priority in the moment of what I can work on. Right. And if I'm committed to being with my family, that's my priority. I can't simultaneously work on the business. Right. Someone else on my team can do that, but I, in my human form, can only work on one thing at a time. That is the priority. And so when you live your priority, it is that you understand what is most important to you. And understanding what's most important understands that every single time you say yes to something, you say no to something else. Me saying yes to being here with you and the people that you're called to serve means me saying no to something else. A project, time with my husband, time with working on my curriculum for my Design Your Destiny live event. Whatever it is, it's a no to something else because I'm saying yes to this. And sometimes people don't understand the consequences of that. So that's number 4. Number 5 is create a meaningful and memorable presence. And presence is 3 specific areas. Presence is understanding the here and now, which most people live in the past or the future and very, very little time in the present. There's the second element to presence is gratitude, understanding that when you're in the moment, what it is that you're most grateful for, and you carry that with you just as your sense of being. And number 3 is understanding the art of positioning in presence. And so that's understanding what to say, who to say it, when to say it, how to say it when you're in conversation. And that's actually something that has helped clients of mine go from 0 clients, brand new, starting out, to walking away with hundreds of thousands of dollars of contracts and clients in 6 to 8 month time frame.
Wow.
And it's because positioning is that powerful. And that's under presence. And then 6 is evaluating your progress. So you still have to go back and say, this is where your numbers, whether you're talking about profit or whether or not you're even looking at what you're doing and whether your plan is working for you. I encourage people to evaluate their progress once a week. Where am I? What's working? What's not working? What should I be celebrating? What should I let go of? All of those pieces. We look at things in my business every week. And just recently, I wanted to launch that Connection, the New Currency book in October. I was clear it was going to be launched in October, and looked at my team, had a conversation, and one day we just got to the point, I was like, it is not going to be October. We're going to launch the Influential Leadership Blueprint. We've got my annual conference. I'm facilitating a retreat in California at the end of November. I'm facilitating a retreat in Costa Rica. It is not going to happen in December. Wow. So we've moved it out to March. It's not what I wanted. It was part of my 2018 plan, and it's not a failure. It's a choice. Evaluate your progress. And number 7 is investing in personal and professional development. I take probably 2 months out of every 12 months that I'm at trainings someplace in different parts of the world. I believe that the more that I am a better version of who I'm called to be, the better I can be to serve my clients. And they benefit every single time I go. And it doesn't matter whether it's a silent retreat where I spend 5 days in silence at a retreat house, whether it's actually to attend a training that somebody is on. I just spent 3 days talking about vulnerability and safety on stage, how to create safety in a room, which is something that's so important to me. I did a training earlier in the year on, dancing in masculine and feminine energy. I mean, I'm always doing something that is designed to expand the work that I'm doing. I want to create new curriculum for Design Your Destiny Live this year. And what I realized is, if I create curriculum without me being different, it's taking new wine and putting it in old wineskins. I do not want to do that. Yeah. I am going to, so now I'm in a place where it's like November, the event's in January, and I'm like, okay, you've spent the last 11 months doing things, 10 months doing things, and it's now time. And I feel like I'm really a different person.
If you were to go back to your 25-year-old self, and I don't know how old you are, you look young, but I'm not going to ask.
I'm 49.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Really? I thought you were like 35.
No, I'll be 50.
Are you serious?
Yes.
You look good. You seriously look good. Like, I'm not even kidding. I'm not going to even say for your age because you just look good, period.
Well, thank you. And it's very funny. My husband has gray hair and he's just a couple of years older than me. And whenever I go places, I can tell people think that like there's a big gap between us because he's gray. Like gray hair, and
wow, so he's a silver fox, and you're standing right next to him as a blonde bombshell. That's awesome.
It's very funny.
You know what? Maybe it's all the knowledge. This is good for everybody. Maybe if you put more self-development and you just do a lot of personal development, this will make you younger. So
because it peels away the layers of your the stress of trying to be something you're not. Right.
Right. Wow, you look great. Okay.
So, thank you.
So I guess then your 25-year-old self, if you could go back, what would you tell her? It could be like 1 or 2 things. It doesn't matter. What would you tell her to set her up for success quicker than maybe it took you? Maybe it's not necessarily it took you so long, but like to set her up for success faster in some way.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. At 25, I was a hot mess. I mean, I was literally just a mess on the inside. So I just really was unsure. And so what advice would I give myself back then? I would say that my first piece of advice would be, don't take yourself so seriously. Like, it ain't that deep. And so it just, you know, the things that I thought were so important, and if it didn't happen, it would be the end of the world. It really wasn't that important. And then the second thing is be incredibly, incredibly careful with who you surround yourself with. Choosing to pick people who live their life as a 10, like they see life as being amazing and wonderful and possible, just anything is possible, and that they really believe in your ability to have anything you want. Like that just so important. Those two pieces of advice, I think, would have shifted a lot of things for me.
Wow. I love that you say that, because definitely in my transition, you know, leaving college and starting my own business, I can say this much, that I lost, I want to say 95% of my friends.
Wow.
Like basically all of them. I was left with probably 2 or 3. And it was a choice. And so it was a choice and a decision that I made. So it wasn't necessarily for people to feel bad or anything. It was more so of a, you know, and it doesn't take me very long to learn a lesson. You know, if I mess up once, that's it. I don't need to do it 3 or 4 times to get it, you know? And when I saw how quickly my life was looking like because of the people I was surrounding myself with, and just hanging out with friends that were just wasting time talking about stupid things that didn't matter about our futures in any way. It just didn't feel good, you know. None of the conversations felt good. As soon as I realized that, my whole world changed. My priorities changed. My income changed. You know, most of my friends are 40. Most of my friends are like literally 35 plus. Very rare, like maybe 3 friends I have that are around my age. And it's because I did it on purpose, because I knew that, you know, not saying the ones that I have that are my age are, you know, nothing compared to the other ones. They're actually really mature for themselves. But when you start at a young age and doing that, you're right. It sets you up for success.
Yeah.
It really, really does. So thank you for sharing that. I'm
Absolutely.
sure your 25-year-old self looking at you now is probably like, man, I'm a boss ass woman. So badass.
She's not there yet, but she's getting there.
No, I think you're doing a really great job. Very honored to have you on here. And then I guess the last question to ask you is, where can we find you? You know, where can my viewers come and find you, and maybe even want to sign up with you? Where can that be?
Where can they find me? Well, I have a website, upsidethinking.com, UPSIDE, and then the word thinking.com. And that website, you can actually get my influential leadership blueprint, which is a free gift. And it has lots of information of also how then you can get access to free trainings and classes and also information about my business. And I so love the personal connection. So I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm active on Facebook. Those are probably my two favorite places, is LinkedIn and Facebook. And I welcome new requests to connect and friendships, and love learning about people. And I know that you and I actually also connected through social media. Yes. And ended up in deeper conversation. And so I just so appreciate that, learning about people and what's important to them. And so reach out to me.
All right, perfect. And guys, and I can speak for myself, you know, definitely, you know, when she reached out, we reached out together. I don't know how that happened, but Lisa's really, really kind. She definitely having a conversation with her is just amazing. So I would definitely recommend it. So if you're hesitant, don't, just reach out to her, you know. It doesn't hurt at all.
Thank you.
No problem. Lisa, thank you for being on here. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing so many amazing wisdom and like advice, and just everything that you're doing is just phenomenal. And I'm excited to see where you're going to be in the next 5 years, even let alone just in a year, you know. And I'm excited.
Me too.
And guys, if you're interested and you want to hear more about what she does, please go visit her website, or also just check out her books. You know, so they're going to be, I think you have 2 releasing soon, correct? Or you have 1 released and you have another one coming out.
Right, and then I have the one in March. Yes, exactly. And we have others. I think I have 6, and so there's others that are out there. They're just a little older.
It's okay. I mean, you know, I'm sure the knowledge and the golden nuggets in there are amazing. So
thank you. Matter.
All right, guys. I just want, I hope this was great for you all. And Lisa, thank you again. I really appreciate you coming out.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Hadeel, for having me.